Next season, we should be getting a ton of Stasis artifact based mods with the goal that it makes Stasis feel usable again. Stasis really hasn't been meta ever since Strand came out because it was just better in like every single way, but Strand did also get some heavy nerfs this season, so I wanted to put out an updated version of one of my favorite Stasis builds, which is the Osmiomancy Cold Snap setup. This build did also, unironically, seem to get a stealth buff this season. Imagine uploaded a video showcasing it, which I will have linked below if you guys do want to check it out, where it shows that the Seekers from iceflare bolts can now refreeze the same enemy. I used to run this build with Bleak Watcher turrets, but I honestly don't think Bleak Watchers are all that strong anymore. They really aren't needed, they don't synergize as well with Osmiomancies, and they play a lot slower. Plus, the build felt better just relying on the normal cold snaps for ad clear, along with those buffed iceflare bolts. With the setup I'm covering in today's video, we are mainly relying on the energy returns from Osmiomancy gloves and grenade kickstart mods. Freezing enemies with our cold snaps by default is going to give a ton of energy back. It's anywhere from 10 to 30% energy for every red bar that it freezes, but it does also seem like this can register twice, fully refunding grenades in most cases. Frozen enemies also are going to be releasing stasis shards, which are then used to become charged with light, which is exactly how we're utilizing grenade kickstart mods, which are also giving up to 37.8% of our grenade back anytime we throw it. And then in a lot of cases, we're also getting additional ad clear through the shatter effect, so we can freeze a large group of enemies, kill one of them, which will then shatter and chain react to kill everything, which is also going to be sending out more iceflare bolts, which can freeze additional enemies. I think the only major downside, and something that I do really hope changes with Stasis next season, is that some of the mods are kind of unusable. For example, this is a grenade-based build, which would be perfect with a mod like Firepower, except Firepower doesn't work with iceflare bolts or most of the Stasis grenades, and this ends up being the case for a few other ability-based mods too. Ashes to Assets obviously needs grenade kills to give super energy, and something like Heavy Handed doesn't really work if our melee isn't directly getting that kill. It might only be a couple mods, but these tend to be pretty important with the current build system. So I think if these end up working in one way or another, it could add a lot more potential to Stasis. Before we hop into the full build, if you guys do end up enjoying the video, make sure to drop a quick like and sub down below, and also make sure to check out more build info over at Mobalytics. All of my builds that you guys have seen this season are featured over on Mobalytics. You can check out the full build, get a bunch of extra information like how the build works and the gameplay loop, or you could always browse other builds from other creators and check things out like the exotic tier lists and the god roll weapons to get a better understanding of Destiny 2. Taking a look at our main abilities for the build, obviously we're on Winter's Wrath for our super. I'm running Healing Rift. I don't think Empowering Rift adds too much to the build. You also tend not to have too many healing / survivability options on Stasis, so I do think Healing Rift is by far the best option. And then obviously Penumbral Blast is our only melee ability, and for your grenade, absolutely make sure you're running Cold Snaps because that's the center point for the build and works directly with Osmiomancies. For our very first aspect, we are obviously rocking iceflare bolts with the build. With this, anytime we shatter a frozen target, no matter how that enemy got frozen, we are now releasing an iceflare bolt off of that enemy when they shatter, and that iceflare bolt is going to travel on the ground 12 meters looking for another enemy, and if it hits something, it will instantly freeze that as well. And we should be able to chain this with something like our cold snaps 3 to 4 times, so we can shatter, send an iceflare bolt out, have it freeze something else, shatter again, and keep this process going off of something like just one grenade. Or you can also always spawn and start this cycle up with things like Conditional Finality, even Egger Scepter. Anything that freezes and applies that freeze effect to enemies will then allow us to get that shatter to go through and send out iceflare bolts. Second to this is going to be the aspect Glacial Harvest. With this applied, anytime we freeze an enemy, it's going to spawn a stasis shard around their position, which can then be collected. Collecting these gives melee energy back, and when we freeze enemies of different tiers, it increases the shards that we create. So a red bar will be 1 shard, a orange bar or major is 2, and then a boss, mini boss, or a champion should be 3 stasis shards. And then more important to all of that is the fact that when we collect these shards with some of our mods, we're going to be getting armor charge stacks, which directly feeds into grenade kickstart. Lastly, we have our fragments. First up is going to be Whisper of Chains. This is going to give us 40% damage reduction anytime we are near a frozen target or a stasis crystal, which is super nice for surviving with the build. Whisper of Torment is great for giving grenade energy back on the build. Anytime we take damage, we get 4% of our grenade straight back with a 1-second cooldown. So basically every 1 second we can get 4%. The better part of this is that if we're critical in taking damage, instead of 4%, we instead get 16.7% of our grenade energy back back every second that we're taking damage, which is pretty insane. Whisper of Refraction is really nice. This way we have constant high class ability uptime when using Healing Rift, which is the only major healing option we have with the build. Anytime we defeat a slow to frozen target, that is granting class ability energy. We get more energy for higher tier target defeats. Lastly, we do have Whisper of Fissures. This increases the damage and the size of the explosion anytime we shatter an enemy. With the build, we're using our grenades to freeze large groups of adds and then focusing one enemy within that to trigger the shatter effect and get a big chain reaction to go off, so we can add clear super quickly in large groups of adds. This helps give us another damage instance, I believe. So you shatter and it technically does 2 instances of damage. It also increases like the minimum amount of damage that you can do, increases the baseline damage by like 12.5%. And then at the end of the day, we have a 10-meter radius that this is affecting enemies in. So 10 meters when anything shatters is a pretty large area. On screen right now are all the mods we're using with the build. If you guys want, you can pause the video and apply everything yourself, or as always, there will be a dim link below, so you can click once and apply that to your character in game as well. On our helmet, these mods aren't super important. I just have a Void Strand dual siphon mod on. I really was only using the Void Siphon because I was using Funnel Web. You can use whatever weapon you want and hot swap these as you please. And then I was also obviously using a primary, so I just always tend to rock a heavy ammo finder. These mods aren't super important though. On our gauntlets, which are obviously once again Osmiomancy gloves, make sure you're running this. All we really have are double grenade kickstarts. There's really not too many mods that are going to add to the build. Firepower is not going to work. You could use things like momentum transfer or bolstering. If you did want to use those, I don't think they add too much to the build. We really just want to focus on insanely high grenade uptime. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is just with double grenade kickstarts. You could rock triple if you really wanted to. I just chose to go with a high stat resilience mod here. So you can do double, you can do triple, and these will be super effective. On my chest piece, as always, I have 3 copies of damage resistance mods. Nothing else major is really going to add anything to the build from your chest piece, so I highly recommend just rocking 3 resistance-based mods. On our boots, we do have Innervation. You could easily hot swap this to Recuperation if you wanted as well. Between these 2 mods, you'll be fine either way. Recuperation is better if you want that healing for the orbs you create, and if you don't really struggle to survive in the activity, you might as well get that extra 10% grenade energy per orb through Innervation instead. So whatever you choose works fine. And then after this, Elemental Charge works with the Stasis shards and Glacial Harvest, so that we can slowly get armor charge stacks over time by collecting those shards. And then instead of getting 1 armor charge stack each time, with stacks on stacks, we're now getting 2 charges instead, so that gives us more uptime and more efficiency on our grenade kickstart mods. Lastly, on our class item, I do have double bomber on. 1 copy is 20% of our grenade, 2 copies is 25 anytime we use our rift. And then even though we're not making a ton of orbs, I love running powerful attraction on most builds. It's super strong, so we can collect all orbs of power nearby by using our class ability, which does happen pretty often with this build because we do have refraction, so we can put healing rifts down like nuts, and we can collect orbs of power nearby if we need to. That is basically it for the video. I'm hoping the mods we get next season do actually end up making Stasis worth using, similar to the Arc mods that we got last season. Also, I do stream a bunch over on my Twitch, so if you guys do want to come and hang out over there and game, a link to that is in the description down below. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.